Salam, peace and shalom. Welcome to the fall session of Interfaith Explorations, and today is our fourth class, if I'm not wrong. My name is Sophia Said, your host and moderator, and here is Dr. J. McDaniels, our moderator and also the teacher for today. The classes are sponsored by the Interfaith Center of Arkansas, and I serve as the executive director of the Interfaith Center, and also by the Cobb Institute in California, and Dr. J. McDaniel serves on the board of Cobb Institute. If you missed a specific session and if you would like to have a recording, please let me know and I would be happy to send it to you. The book that we are using in our fall interfaith explorations is The World's Wisdom by Philip Novak, that you probably all are very familiar with right now. And what we are doing is we are picking small passages from scripture and text of different religions, and these passages we're reading them and asking for a reader's response from you all. And these passages are serving as poems or that would hopefully spur your imagination and then serve as a springboard for individual and communal reflection. And today we are going to cover Taoism. And before I get there, I'm going to pull up my screen and see if we can get the scripture up there. So give me 1 second. I'm not doing good on this. So meanwhile, I'm pulling up the text. I want you to know that we have a wonderful interfaith panel coming up on this coming weekend that I'm moderating with 3 phenomenal authors, 2 Jewish and 1 Muslim. And it'll be an interfaith panel which is going to touch on a lot of things regarding scripture. Okay, here we got it. I'm going to tell you about our upcoming interfaith event on Sunday, October 24th at the end of the session. But right now we are going to go to today's class on Taoism. Here you go, Dr. McDaniel.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be with you again today. And in the former sessions, we had people from within given paths introducing the text, and then the rest of us talked about them. This time around, it's a little different because, formally speaking, I would not say I'm a Taoist, and that's how you pronounce it. You pronounce it as if it's a D, so Taoism. But I sure learned a lot from Taoism, and I sure work with a lot of people that are shaped by it. Much of my own work is in mainland China. And for about 10 or 12 years, I've been going to China, teaching in China. Past 2 years, it's been remote, but I feel deep friendship with many, many people in China. The tradition of Taoism, which is one of their 2 traditions, the other is Confucianism. The tradition of Taoism shapes the East Asian imagination, and I'm so glad to introduce it to us. And I think you'll be interested in what we see. Now, we have been dealing with texts from the many world traditions, and I'd like to begin right now with an image. And if you think of an image as a text, an image is a text. It's something that can be read and learned from and understood. Architecture is a text. This particular image comes from Taoism, and you've seen it many, many times. And it's sometimes called the yin-yang image. And when you see this image, you need to feel a sense of dynamism. It's not static. The dark flows into the light, and the light flows into the dark. So the dark is not by any means entirely separated from the light, or the other way around, and they're moving. And for those whose hearts and minds are shaped by Taoism, this embodies kind of the whole nature of things, the nature of a person, the nature of the universe. The light and the dark symbolize different things in the Taoist imagination. They're called yin and yang, and yin would be the dark one, and it symbolizes nurturance, womb, night, and softness. And for some, the female, and the light symbolizes a kind of activity, a kind of assertiveness. The sun, daytime. Now, many Western feminists and Asian feminists as well have resisted the idea that the dark is female and the light male. And so to get into the spirit of Taoism, don't worry so much about that. Just imagine yourself as a combination of these two aspects. Whoever you are, don't worry about gender. But you and I alike contain within ourselves these different impulses, the yin and the yang. And so does the entire universe. So with that in mind, let's go down to one of the texts. The most famous text in Taoism is called the Tao Te Ching. And it's written in classical Chinese. And it's really very beautiful and very, very poetic. And I'm going to read you a translation of three passages. Here's the first. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. The Tao is like a well, used but never used up. It is like the eternal void, filled with infinite possibilities. It is hidden, but always present. I don't know who gave birth to it. It is older than God. The Tao is called the Great Mother, empty yet inexhaustible. It gives birth to infinite worlds. It flows through all things, inside and outside, and returns to the origin of all things. So Sophia, if we could have the gallery view for a minute, I'd like to just say a word about that passage. The Tao is, you might begin by thinking of the Tao as God. That's a word that a Westerner would naturally be inclined to use. Oh, you're talking about the source of all things, or that of which everything is an expression, or the deepest of the deep, or the widest of the wide. And in a way, that would be true. But the thing about the Tao is when you name it, when you describe it too much, you miss it. We know how in Judaism, you can sometimes cross out the O in the word God because it makes a thing of God. And so it is with the Tao. Now, in that passage, the Tao is also called the mother of the universe. And what you have in Chinese traditions is a kind of fluid imagination. Sometimes the Tao will be described in that kind of a human-like terminology, the mother of the universe, the womb from which all things emerge. And sometimes it's more, I wouldn't say abstract, it's more like the wind or like breath. You can't box in the wind. You can't box in breath. So when you think of what is ultimately real in this Chinese context, you kind of go both ways. It's the mother of all things. It's beyond all names, and yet it's everywhere. And I've been using the word it, and I think that's kind of natural. So many in the West are actually attracted to Taoism because it bypasses questions of a hyper-personal God, of a lawgiver, of a judge, of one who's watching. It's more like a force that's everywhere. And that is what is ultimately real. Now, in the next passage, we'll be dealing with the idea of how would one live in harmony with the Tao. And harmony is a key word in all Chinese traditions. What's life about? It's to live in harmony. So I think I'll read this one too, and then let's just stop and talk. Well, to live in harmony with the Tao, you need to empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. See the turmoil of things, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. But when you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king, immersed in the wonder of the Tao. You can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you're ready. So let's talk about those two passages. And Sophia, if you can, I'm going to get my gallery view so I can see everybody and see hands up. There we are. And to say too much would be to miss it all. So for that very reason, I will say too much. Because this is a conversation. Does the Tao, I'll start with this, does the Tao come close to what you understand religion to be about? I'll start there. Or is it very far away from what you've understood religion to be about? Deb.
For me, it doesn't so much speak about religion, but about faith and belief and spirituality. But religion to me is about practice and ritual, things like that, in addition to faith and belief. And I'm not sure that Taoism, I've never seen that as Taoism. So it's a belief, and it is certainly nothing that I've ever read or heard about Taoism contradicts anything in Judaism at all.
Mm-hmm. So would you say a spirituality, but not a religion?
Right. And it's a practice and a way of seeing the world. And all of that to me enhances Judaism for me. But it doesn't contradict anything.
Anybody else? Thanks, Deb.
Deb Holmes is here.
Joyce,
hey, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it's interesting, I guess, when a person who believes in God looks at the Tao, it looks like God. Of course, as a Buddhist, when I look at it, it looks like nirvana. You know? It's eternal, can't be described. You see it when you're at peace. So, you know, as a Buddhist, I guess I've always been sort of jealous of Taoism. It was like a much cooler and more poetic version of Buddhism. from my point of view. That's all.
Gotcha. Yeah. And was it Joyce? Joyce, you wanted to say something?
Yes, to me, I agree with what Deb said about it being more about spirituality. And my sense is that what I just heard is kind of the epitome of the ageless wisdom that unites all religions and all spiritual paths.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else want to say? I think right now, does the Tao seem religious is kind of our question. A little like God, or a little like Nirvana, or, you know, however you feel it. Meg, did you want to say something?
Yes. You can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm with Debbie. I'm actually with everybody on this, but what I see is, yes, reminds me of God, but a little bit more mobile, like a mobile God. Because what I hear when you said wind and spirit, I thought about something in Judaism, the Ruach, which is wind and spirit that flows through all things. And the second paragraph I completely loved because it's practical. It's experiential and something that you might not think of all of those things in the same moment, but they're making you think of them. And I think it's beautiful.
Great. Thanks, Meg. Lynn, and then I think we're going to go back to the passage after your remark, Lynn, and focus on a few key phrases and see what we make of them. Lynn, go ahead.
Just very quickly, I know it's an ancient text, but it seems very modern to me. Very, very modern. And the more that we explore the universe, the more this becomes very true. The thread of the universality of it spreading through the universe. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Yeah.
It's very modern for a very ancient text.
And you know, Lynn, like Meg said, it is fluid. It is like Ruah. And in a way, you can kind of imagine Taoism as saying the ultimate reality is Ruah. Ruah isn't just the breath of God. Ruah is God. It's not that God is one thing and God's breathing another. It is the ultimate reality is a kind of breathing.
I guess
in that sense, it's moving. Yes.
The difficulty in understanding a concept this abstract in a way is that we are so limited by language.
Well, that's something I think we can talk about. And I want to. Two other aspects of that is the attitude toward language in that what we read, and also the descriptions of character. So yeah, Carol, go ahead.
I don't know if I can answer, is it religion or not religion? I don't think that's what I can answer. I can answer the call to name something infinite with finite terms, with the tools of finite tools to name the infinite as experienced, as wind or water, or because language freezes it. Once you say it, it is, and then it stops. Its dynamism is stopped. You know, its movement is stopped, and it's very much the flow of what animates life or what is life, and it humbles us because language is so limited in the face of this great known yet not named presence.
Thanks. Let's go back to the passage for just a second, if that's all right. Sophia, if you can put it back up.
Let me put it back up.
So we'll be going back and forth. And I just like to say, let's take a look at this idea that when you realize the Tao, it's in the second one, when you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. You can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you are ready. I'm imagining that when you read those passages, when I read the passages, I like tolerance. That sounds pretty good. And amusement, I can kind of get that because I think humor plays a role in a healthy life. And kind-hearted, oh, I'm all about that. Isn't it wonderful? Dignified, I get that. But I'm not quite so sure what to do with disinterested. And so I wanted to ask you, can you give a positive take, a positive read to the idea that when we're in harmony with the Tao, there is a kind of disinterest that's part of our life, or by contrast, no, I see no value at all in that. So Sophia, if you can bring up the screen again.
Okay, here we go. Jay, going back to your previous question of religion. So religion, as I have seen it evolved in my life, it brings a lot of structure. And last night I was reading a book on the dangers of religion, and it kept on focusing on ritual, scripture, and community. So religion has been a force or a source of bringing organized structure in your life, whereas when we look at Taoism, it's all about letting go. And coming to your point of disinterested, I actually hear it as letting go, not disinterested. Do what you need to do and then let go of the rest. So I think initially for somebody who's raised in a religious and strong communal religious framework, Taoism can be scary because it forces you, it invites you to shatter all the borders and boundaries that you have created in your life. But slowly it's very liberating and empowering because it is like that ruach, the spirit that flows through you and through your religion as well. So yeah, from scary to liberating, that could be the experience of Taoism for me.
And Jay, this is Jerry. It could be that distracted may be what they're saying versus disinterested. Because I do, we spend a lot of our time running after phone calls or, our emails or whatever. Disinterested sounds morally not compatible with the other things. Distracted, I mean, I'm not wanting to rewrite this, but disinterest seems a little, I don't know, wrong, but distracted, I would offer maybe more what they're trying to say.
Well, I was hoping that this might push a button or two. And so right now, I think we've got one vote for and one vote against.
I think disinterested to me is not, I think it means objective, like a judge should be disinterested. He should not, be for one side or the other. He needs to listen carefully and weigh things. I don't think that means he's not interested. He just has to be objective. That's my reading of disinterested.
I've got 2 votes for and 1 questioning. Let's Lynn and Carol and both of you.
We have lots of hands up, so I'm going to highlight all of them as
I looked the word up in the dictionary because that's what I do. And the first definition is not having the mind or feelings engaged.
Yeah.
So I agree with Sophia. I think she's spot on. I don't think there's any action involved in this at all. So you're not distracted, you're not engaged, you're disinterested. And that's the feeling that I would describe as letting go. You're just letting go. And that's really what faith is when you think about it.
I can't tell where that vote is, so I'm going to get over this let's have a vote kind of thing. But I think there are a bunch of hands. So Sophia, can you see the hands better than I can?
Yes, let's call on to Carmen and then we'll go to Lauren. Carmen, can you unmute yourself?
When I think of disinterested, I think of not jumping into the drama, not investing myself and my emotion into what's going on, but being more, while still a part of the larger whole and of everything and everyone that's involved, but being more of an observer or a watcher while being a part. So I think Lynn said that it's kind of like, it's not so much being a judge as in judging, but as in being able to watch without jumping in.
Lauren?
I kind of think of it as, well, I had two initial thoughts. So the first one was being unbothered. So, which is kind of tracking with what other folks have been saying. So not being preoccupied with like the trials and tribulations that life throws at us. And then the other one that I thought of that kind of led to is being unburdened. And so that kind of flows from being unbothered, from being disengaged from the kind of chaos that we are just constantly surrounded by. It kind of made me think of, just to like visualize it, like a reed in a stream. It's constantly being moved by the water, but it doesn't ever try to go against the water. It just goes with it. It just stays in place and it just kind of bends and flows with, whatever the water is doing.
Anybody else? Thanks, Lauren. Anybody else on this? Carol?
Yeah, I think everyone said it in one way or another, but maybe detached rather than disinterested, detached from outcome specifically. Again, I find that as a kind of humbling state to be in, just to notice and witness life with that sense of detachment from outcome.
I think
we have Joyce and Debbie as well waiting to speak.
Well, I can go. I wanted to add on to just comment on Lynn's first comment that ancient texts, to me, ancient words or old, however old they are, the ones that are significant, that are meaningful, are eternal for no matter what time we are in. That's how you can, one of the ways that I can tell whether something is really rich and important is that it's just as true today. Tomorrow I will see something else in it. But also, I agree with everyone to a point, but I don't think that being disinterested, whatever, it's about boundaries. It's about what's yours is yours and what is not yours is not yours, and the emotional, not getting caught up in the emotions that other people are going through, or even yours when they become detrimental. But I also, to me, it's not passive at all. You take action, you do what is the right thing to do. You take part in society, but you let go of the outcome, that you do what you do, and you do what with clarity. From detaching from the emotional side, you have more clarity about what is important and what is helpful and what does need to be done. And if you focus on that, and what other people do is not really your concern if it doesn't affect what you do. It's a balance. It's finding that harmony in your actions as well as in your inner self. So I don't see it as passive as the impression I'm getting listening to everybody's comments.
Joyce?
Yes, and I automatically reinterpreted into Buddhist terms in that it would mean free from the bias of attachment and aversion.
Equanimity was the word that came to my mind.
Did we lose Jay in all this discussion?
He's had it with us.
He did push some buttons right here. Okay, let's just go back to the text again, if I can find it. Yeah. Right here. And we will. So Meg is saying perhaps a better word would be self-interested. If anybody has a comment on that.
Yeah, I think the problem we're having is that we don't really understand what the word disinterested means. We tend to use it improperly in English. It doesn't mean uninterested. I think detached is actually the closest thing. Somebody said detached. I think it was Carol. That's probably as good a word, but disinterested is the right word. It's just we don't really understand what disinterested means.
So let me read another passage from the book, which is not, which me and Jay did not put on website, but that might help shed more light on this word. So the scripture goes, "He who stands on tiptoe does not stand firm. He who rushes ahead does not go far. He who tries to shine dims his own light, and he who defines himself can't know who he really is. He who has the power over others can't empower himself, and he who clings to his work will create nothing that endures. If you want to accord with the Tao, just do your job and then let go."
Mhm.
So if you want to accord with the Tao, just do your job and then let go. So I think that kinds of explain or at least shed some light on the concept of disinterested, that how it's used in the text here. But let's go to the next reading.
Hey, Sophia, I'm back now.
Oh, where are you, Jay? I can't see you. Let's see. Let's highlight you.
I knew that you would go with the flow no matter what happened.
Here we are. Well, we are having a wonderful discussion on the concept of disinterested. You did push some buttons. You better give us your take now.
Let me just raise a question and then we'll go on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about my involvement in social justice concerns, or my involvement in political culture, it's one thing to say be disinterested, but it's another thing to say, can I really? Or and it's one thing to say, don't be attached to outcomes, but another thing to say, can I really? And so I just want to say that I think that this is a bit of a challenge also.
Could it be a practice? Could it be a practice rather than a challenge? This becomes the practice.
Yeah. Carol, I think there's some people, I'll speak from the inside, who when involved in political matters, they think that attachment to outcomes is everything. What do you mean don't be attached to outcomes? We want to win and we want them to lose. And so in that sense, it calls me to question that approach. And I'm not sure what to do with that, but it does call me to question that. Let's move to the next one. for a second. We can get back to this, but there's a couple of other things we need to talk about maybe. So Sophia, can you bring it up?
Yes, here we are.
Let's go to the above a little bit. Scroll up just a little bit.
Okay.
Further.
Oh, no, here.
Further. No, the other way. Right there. That's fine. Now, Sophia, the one that you just read was this one, living in harmony with the Tao. He who stands on tiptoe doesn't stand firm.
Oh, you have it right here. I am so sorry. I didn't know that. I was reading the book last night and it really stood out to me in the book, but let's do it again.
Well, he who stands on tiptoe doesn't stand firm. He who rushes ahead doesn't go far. He who tries to shine dims his own light. He who defines himself can't know who he really is. He who has the power over others cannot empower himself. He who clings to his work will create nothing that endures. If you want to live in accord with the Tao, just do your job, then let go. A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent upon arriving. I'll offer a little word here about all of these sentences can raise questions for us. But let's take, for example, he who defines himself can't know who he really is, or she who defines herself can't know who she really is. And if you can give us the gallery view just for a second, Sophia. Many of us, at least I'll speak for myself, spend a lot of our lives trying to understand who we are or who we're supposed to be or who we want to be. And we do it in terms of religion. I'm Jewish. I'm Christian. I'm Muslim. We do it in terms of gender and sexuality. I'm straight. I'm gay. We do it in terms of politics. I'm Democrat. I'm Republican. We do it in terms of nationality. I'm an American. And I think Taoism is an invitation not to worry so much about defining yourself, and also to realize that an overriding preoccupation with self-definition can really get in the way of living a good life. An overriding concern with self-definition can get in the way. Any thoughts on that from anybody else?
Well, I'll start by saying it's very contrary to modern Western culture, actually. We're taught to become independent very high. While we're becoming independent, very high focus on self-identity and defining it and marketing and packaging it in ways which are relevant. And especially nowadays, the expectations to remain relevant. So I think it's really, really contrary, and mind boggles over how we put the two together, how we are raised versus what it's teaching us.
And Jay, you've gone through this recently. You've retired from Hendrix. I'm in the process of retiring at the end of this year. And, I'm with a nonprofit. I was the founder, and it's been identified to me. And I'll step away. And then, that identity is very fragile and timely. And, but it becomes part of you in a way that is not necessarily healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think, and you have layers of identification. You went through those, male, female, whatever. Mm-hmm. And, it's really a journey inward to really say that was a nice person. That person is, transitioning to someone else. But, and also the phone stopped. I mean, I've been on chairs and boards, and all of a sudden you step down and the phone stops, and you internalize that in some value reduction. which
Yeah.
none of it's healthy. I mean, some of it maybe, but most of it isn't.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, Nita. Thanks, Jerry. And agree and
yes,
understand.
I was kind of drawn back to the earlier passages that say you need to know where you come from, and then there's less struggle and source. And so, however that is defined in Taoism or whichever other faith, that seems to be a pivotal point. And it allows us to struggle less with self-identity if we're embraced by the greater whole.
Nice insight. Can you understand that if I'm a Taoist and somebody comes up to me and says, Jay, who are you? If I respond, I have no idea, that in a certain sense, that's a very authentic response. I don't know. And I will probably never know. And I'm not sure I want to know. So the desire to solidify myself in terms of some identity, Taoism is an invitation to de-solidify.
All right, Jay, this is Tina, and I have a question. I'm thinking about, or have been thinking about in this discussion, how, you know, COVID has changed so many of our lives, almost, you know, indefinably, and may continue to do so. And psychologically, we know that a lot of people, children and adults, have been impacted negatively. How does I guess I could say good psychology, if there is such a thing, with a counselor, how does it fit this down?
You know, Tina, you were going in and out there.
Oh,
it's okay, but can you articulate it one more time very quickly?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. I'm wondering how psychological counseling squares with the concept of Taoism, because so many people need psychological help during, you know, stressful times, particularly during COVID.
Tina, I don't think Taoism is a solution to all problems, and so I'm very context centered. You know, it depends, but I can certainly imagine a counselor, a wise counselor, saying to somebody, you know, it's okay not to know who you are. It's okay not to have such a solid sense of identity. It's okay not to know where you're going. There's deep wisdom in not knowing.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that can be very, very helpful advice. Sometimes.
Right.
And I need to say that this applies religiously too. So if somebody says, Jay McDaniel, are you Christian? I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure who I am. From a Taoist perspective, there would be wisdom in that response. The wisdom of not knowing, not claiming. Sometimes that's very wise. Yeah, Deb, go ahead.
I have very few areas of myself that I feel strongly that this is who I am. One is I am female. I have no doubt about that. Now, being female doesn't necessarily exclude homosexuals' experiences, but I am female in how my brain works, how I think, all of that. I feel that I am Jewish, if by nothing else than by heritage and genealogy and ancestry. It doesn't mean that I can't practice other religions or look into other beliefs or any of that, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm Jewish. So other than that, I've had other things in my life that I've noticed other people really having a strong attachment to that identity, like being a mother, being a nurse was a big one. And I have never felt that. When people ask when I was nursing, and they say, well, who are, I never said I was a nurse, whereas other people did. That was their identity. I feel that I'm creative, but I don't necessarily identify as an artist. I'm many things, and I'm changing the longer I live. So I don't feel any conflict with that at all. One thing I wanted to share though quickly is I remember when I was working and I was a supervisor, and I would tell the people who worked with me, you know, if everybody would do their job and only do their job, things would go a lot smoother.
True. Jake Lauren has a question, and we need to move to the next package.
All right. Let's lift up Doug's comment too. Doug put a comment in chat that he said having an identity can both be a prison and a life preserver. I thought that was a very helpful point, Doug.
Thanks. Just a thought.
One more comment, and then we move on to the next one.
Lauren.
Oh, well, actually, Doug solidified what I was going to talk about very eloquently in just one sentence. I was just going to speak very quickly of this need to identify and categorize is actually also rooted in like human biology and psychology, because it at one point we had to go and be able to distinguish, you know, predator from prey, poisonous from edible. And so I think something that can kind of be parsed out of this particular text is we can go and acknowledge different labels, different identities, but it's whether or not we assign value to them of some kind. I can go and acknowledge that, you know, I'm a Catholic, but folks may not necessarily, like atheist or agnostic people may not assign that same kind of value, even though they acknowledge that I self-identify as such. So I think that that's something that can also be acknowledged in the text.
So shall we move on? And I don't want us to leave today without knowing the phrase Wu Wei. It's up above, Sophia, just a little above. There we are. Do you see that phrase Wu Wei? It's a kind of take-home phrase, and it's translated in very many different ways. But do you know, do you ever have the experience of feeling that sometimes you're trying too hard and that you become your better self and more creative and more effective in the world when you let go rather than when you try so hard? And there's a kind of relinquishment of intention even. And sometimes creativity emerges naturally when you don't try so hard. And I just want us to know that that's a Taoist idea. It's and it's called Wu Wei. Let's move to this next one, living in harmony with Tao in political life. The Tao Te Ching can be read as both a deeply spiritual text and also as a political text, and it functioned in both ways in China. And so let's look at what is said about someone who is a leader, or think of leadership. What does a leader look like? When the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. Now, next best is a leader who's loved, and next one who is feared. The worst is one who is despised. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. The master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, amazing, we did it, all by ourselves. If you want to be a great leader, you must learn to follow the Tao. Stop trying to control. Let go of fixed plans and concepts. and the world will govern itself. Now, Sophia, if you could give me a gallery view just for a second.
What a scary thought for people like me.
I have to admit, the devil in me chose this passage. You're welcome, Sophia. Because Sophia, you're such a leader, and many of you are, etc. But there's a little saying in there, act so as at the end of your action, the people say, amazing, we did it all by ourselves. And they don't have to point to you as the person that helped make that happen. As a matter of fact, if they do point to you from a Taoist perspective, it's not as good. It's so much better when they say and feel, we did it by ourselves. So the true leader wants that. And you notice in that passage, the next best thing is for the leader to be loved. And after that, the leader to be feared. And after that, hated. But the best thing is for the leader not to be noticed. Because we did it all by ourselves. Now, anybody have any thoughts on that one? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Nita.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was the passage from Micah 6 that says, to walk with justice and humbly with your Lord, and to do rightly and to come together for good causes. It takes humility, I think, to be a fine leader. And I think that's the ancient texts point to that in terms of history and other things. And I think of Martin Luther King immediately too. While he was front and center, he empowered the people. It was a people's movement. Mm-hmm. It was not all about him. It was about peace. It was about justice. It was about civil rights. And it was not all about him. And I think he's a good example of following that humility with courage and determination, but with empowering the people to believe in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else on this? Yeah, Meg.
So I'm going to screw this up. Is it Saint Augustine? Is that how you say it?
Either way.
Okay, I've never really known. Great quote. Pray as if everything depends on God, act as if everything depends on you. Mm-hmm. And that reminded me of the leader becoming invisible so that everybody.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. The leader becomes invisible. And for the leader to be willing to become invisible, the leader needs not to be preoccupied with being recognized, with being flattered, with being put up on a pedestal. If the leader, you can even imagine the leader saying, if I'm not noticed, that's best.
What I was going to say is that as a classroom teacher, as a classroom teacher, encouraging kids to work together in groups and to what my goal was always for them to come with this finished product that they thought that they had put together, and they're so proud of that they shared it with the class. And the idea that they can do this as third graders or sixth graders or seventh graders, all of whom I taught various times, was the most thrilling thing, that they never even mentioned that the teacher was involved. And so I see what we're saying in terms of adult leadership, but actually having been generated in the classroom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ed. Carmen, do you have a comment? I see your hands up.
Well, I think Ellen said it well. In my professional life, I always said the most important thing I ever did was teach. And it reminds me of one of my best teachers was a therapist, and what he did was ask good questions, and I called him the professor. He didn't, so I found the answers all by myself, but he asked good questions. And so I think teaching and asking good questions, from my perspective and in my world, is a big part of leading.
Let's go back to that saying one more time, Sophia, and just attend. Can you get back to the page one more? Yeah. Note it says, let go of fixed plans and concepts, and the world will govern itself. Okay, Sophia. So the idea of letting go of fixed plans, just important to keep in mind, letting go of fixed plans. Carol, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I think it takes a certain kind of knowing. It's not just that the kids believe that they've done this on their own, that actually the leader knows that this is exactly as it should unfold.
That's
so
right.
It's another level of that. It's not only that the student knows that, but the one imparting or participating in the acquisition of wisdom knows that this is unfolding as it should. And that's a very big step back, very big step, as is the statement you just read. In a world that's unbalanced, that takes an enormous amount of trust to, and I think in a world of balance, then step back and know that life is unfolding.
Yeah.
But it's a big challenge. That last piece that you read to us is a very big challenge.
Well, let me close. There's one more passage. If you go to that page, we don't need to read it. I don't think there's time. It's okay. But I wrote an essay in my website, and it was called, "Can a Christian be a Taoist too?" And it's probably one of the most read pieces I've written. And I simply want to say, you can say the same thing. Can a Jew be a Taoist too? Can a Muslim be a Taoist too? Can a spiritual but not religious be a Taoist too? Taoism is not jealous. It doesn't seek converts. No need to add numbers. It's an attitude. And it's available to each and all, and can be internalized from many different perspectives. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. We're right at the end of our session, and thank you for such a beautiful learning of Taoism as an energy, as a flow, as a life that flows through us. Before we close, I really want to quickly share something, an event which is coming up this Sunday, sponsored by the Interfaith Center. Many of you know about the Central Arkansas Libraries Literary Festival. So this year Interfaith Center is sponsoring the festival, and we are bringing 3 authors to the literary festival, and I hope you can see on the screen. The first one is Rabbi Rachel Mikva, who is the chair of the Jewish studies at Jewish Theological Seminary in Chicago. And she wrote this very important book, Dangerous Religious Ideas, that talk about the very productive and also destructive force of the scripture at the same time. Very relevant to this class. So she talks how scripture can be really useful but also very destructive force. And then we have 2 more authors, Walter Ruby and Sabiha Rahman, who both have written a book together that you see on your screen, We Refuse to Be Enemies. And Sabiha is a Pakistani Muslim. Walter is a Jewish American. And the book is about their friendship as a Jewish and as a Muslim brother and a sister, and how they overcame their differences. So those of you who are interested, I will be sending information on how to register for this panel. You do need to register, but you do get to meet these three authors who wrote these books, and registration is free. So I will email it out to you. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. I will close with this poem and a prayer which summarizes a lot of what we said today. And after that, I will see you next week. So where is it? Yeah. In pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. So in pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. But in the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped. Less and less do you need to force things until finally you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. And true mastery can be gained by letting go, by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. So thank you all by letting things go their own way today. I love the joy and the tensions and the vitality in the discussion. Salam, peace, and shalom to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.